When you get away from Mexico's ritzy resorts and scores of tourists, you will find a more authentic Mexico, full of ancient Mayan history, a rich culture, and maybe best of all, a hotspot for biodiversity. Perhaps the only visitor as frequent to Mexico during the summer months, other than tourists, of course, are the world's largest fish, the whale shark. These gentle giants aggregate off the coast of Mexico each year to feed on the plankton-rich waters. When these aggregations were first discovered, a lucrative tourism industry that offered travelers the chance to not only see the sharks but swim with them developed. Whale shark tourism is now a global phenomenon, popular in places like Mexico, the Philippines, and the Galapagos, to name only a few.
All this whale shark industry in the world started 20 years ago. Before that, few people knew what a whale shark is, and no one knew where to see them.
Isla Mujeres, Mexico, directly northeast of Cancun. Years ago, a captain, while on a sailfish trip, mentioned that there were hundreds of whale sharks in the same area in the summer months. We didn't believe him. But even if there were 10 or 20, it was well worth looking at. So we came back in July, a small group of us, and discovered the largest aggregation of whale sharks worldwide, still to this day. When I first went there, I was faced with how do I turn a death island. Isla Mujeres was a fishing island. The only thing that you saw routinely at every place close to the water was dead animals.
Many of the islands out there where fishermen 20 years ago, when the whale sharks, these juveniles, were coming up and were trying to steal fish from the nets, they would hack at them with machetes to try and drive them away, or they'd throw diesel into the water to drive them away. Now, of course, the fishermen love them because they're taking out snorkelers and divers. The very same coastal communities are profiting in a very, very positive way from the whale sharks, and so they have a very deep vested interest in protecting them.
Sean and I went and partnered with a hotel and a boat and some boats, the best boats there, and started an ecotourism business. And the very first year, there were other operators, and the word got out, and that we were changing fishing communities very quickly into very successful, financially stable, all new boats, prosperous island of Isla Mujeres, which is now a thriving ecotourism town, which is so great. Because that's what we need for the future. If we're to have any impact at all, I mean, one of the best things you can do for ecotourism, if you want to save an animal, is go spend some money to see them, get to know them up close. While you're improving your education and falling in love with whatever creature it is, you're also saving it, whether you realize it or not, because somebody is adding up how much money is spent on these animals.
In some areas, they become an icon of the area with a lot of paints and souvenirs. So you can see how the community appreciates the animals.
I think it's a very positive thing indeed. I think it's the only manner in which there will be a sustainable industry, or there will be sustainability in the oceans, because there has to be, unfortunately, very sadly for the human race, there has to be an economic interest. It's a reality that we need to accept, and rather than push against it, we need to work with it.
So the more competition that I have, the more people that I have doing these whale shark trips, even if they're not conservationists, they're still helping, because the value of the whale shark is in the billions of dollars. And that's what's critical to their future.
The captains of the boats, they used to be fishermen, and even they were not focusing on whale sharks. But I think the ocean needs a break, and we are giving an alternative economy to these fishermen into the tourism, and the economy for them, it's better. So it's a way to involve them in conservation. It's a way to give a break to the ocean.
The change that I watched yearly in Isla Mujeres, Mexico, because of the whale shark booming industry was incredible. It went from people angry and upset with each other because they were all starving, they were broke, and in garbage boats, to beautiful boats and happy people, everybody getting along, and peacefulness and a thriving, extremely happy community. And it's such a perfect example of exactly what we need more of in the world.
When they start to feel that they depend on the animal, that their economy, their family depend on this animal, in some point they could have this sensation like I should protect or I should do something. So I think we are trying to be there and trying to feel them responsible of the protection of the animals. And once we get there, I think it's a huge benefit for the animals. So I think it's a benefit for the tourism, for the community, for the city, for the town in general, and also for the animals.
The whale sharks are very, very protected by everybody. We live from them, and if somebody harms a whale shark, it doesn't happen here, but it happens in other countries. For us, a whale shark is worth millions of dollars.
If somebody steals your paycheck, you'll pretty much kill them. And that's exactly what we need, because this is, the value of ecotourism is the best hope for all animals worldwide.
This means that there's a lot of people protecting them. All the fishermen and all the local people and everybody, they take care of it. That's also a benefit for the whale shark.
Unfortunately, in some places at the Caribbean side, it's been out of control, and in some point happened here as well. But I think it was more because the pressure in that side for the massive tourism that is already happening in that area. So we're trying to avoid that happen that here, because in the way that it's been doing there, I don't think it's the right way. Yeah.
We need to make sure that good practices are used, respected in all these areas.
At the very beginning, when it was not regulated, you saw it could have been big chaos, a big mess. And when it started going that way, the government came and said, okay, wait a minute, that's not the way to do it. We have to do it like this, and it has taken now 20 years.
You'll hear some horror stories, probably perhaps in some of the areas of Mexico where, there'll be 100 small vessels or 200 small vessels that head out, gather in an area, and then just hundreds of people are jumping into the water. That will have a negative effect. Whether it has lasting effects or serious repercussions on the individual or the species, I doubt it.
People have said to me, Jim, aren't you horrified that there's 75 boats out there swimming with whale sharks? I said, no, I wish there were 150. Even though it would look like a city out there, it would bring the value of the shark so high that at the first hint of a Japanese killing boat, the people would be up in arms, because they realize that's their paycheck that they're stealing, and that's what we need. We need a lot of people making money off of animals alive that aren't harming them.
I think a good tourism is good for conservation of the animals.
So I think there are ways of managing this. It's got to be based on logic and whatever happens to be working at the time.
To balance tourism with whale shark conservation, you have to focus on the conservation first, and then adapt the tourism to whatever conservation need is.
Use this as a sustainable resource, so it has to be used in moderation. So you have to find ways of limiting it, and it shouldn't be simply, okay, well, the rich who can afford the very expensive trips out to space, for example, or can afford to pay the very high fees, the national park fees in Africa, are the only ones that can travel there. I think you have to find a way that moderates it on an equitative manner that allows everybody to have a chance of visiting, but isn't destroying the very resource that you're so bent on protecting.
It's very good, the tourism activity around the species. Even in some places, as the Philippines, they changed the nets for the tourism, which is great. But in some places, as here in La Paz, we have to face the problems with the propeller cuts to the animals, because in some point the carrying capacity is like more boats that could interact at the same time or per day with the whale sharks. So the tourism industry have to face this type of things.
What have you guys identified as some of the main threats facing whale sharks right now?
They're all anthropogenic. Let's not beat about the bush.
In Mexico, the main threat with tourism is the number of cuts on whale sharks. Yeah.
In the 1980s, whale sharks began to show up as bycatch. In the 1990s, they moved from bycatch to a targeted species. And the reason for that targeting, of course, is the Asian market for shark products, fins, oil, to a certain extent, the skin as well. So for millennia, whale sharks have been fished by coastal communities in sustainable levels. They're usually taking juveniles out of the population, which is not creating a great deal of damage for the species, obviously, and that was sustainable. We don't know the figures right now because we don't have access to many of these fishing operations. The unregulated, unreported, and illegal fishing which is going on in the high seas is probably the single greatest threat that exists right at this moment, but that is compounded by other things as well. Plastic pollution in the oceans, being filter feeders, they're ingesting huge volumes of plastic, and obviously when the digestive tract is blocked, they will die. As whale sharks have negative buoyancy, this is a silent killer that we don't see because they're simply dying and then drifting down to the bottom, so they're sinking. So we're not seeing them washed up on the shores, so there are probably thousands, who knows how many, that are dying each year because of plastic ingestion. Being caught and entangled in nets, and obviously boat strikes. And then, of course, you can add to that global climate change. That might be a slower process, but nonetheless it is there. So all of the effects are anthropogenic in origin.
The habitat pollution or habitat destructions, they aggregate to feed in areas where they have a lot of concentration of food. So they are associated of mangroves and estuaries, and around the world, the mangroves has been destroyed here in Mexico because marina, or because aquaculture, or because a big developments. So in terms of tourism. So mangroves are very important for the ocean, very important for whale sharks. And if we destroy mangroves, we are destroying also an important place for whale sharks.
The intensity of the human use of the oceans these days, we're pretty much fishing and trawling at every single level, vertically in the waters and throughout the globe.
And then pollution and contaminants, microplastics, pesticides. Here we did a study on pesticides, and we found high concentrations on pesticides on whale sharks, and it's something that I feel that we haven't paid much attention. Now microplastics have much attention. It's something that you can see, but the thing of the pesticides, you do not see them. And normally you think that it's just because farming areas, but it's not. Sometimes it's also for golf camps or for tourist places where they just spray for the mosquitoes. So all of that has pesticides, and normally it's in tourist areas where are next to whale shark aggregations. So that's also.
While there are obvious ecological reasons for protecting the ocean and its many inhabitants, like the whale shark, I got the feeling that there was something else fueling the will of these conservationists. Tell me the feeling that you get when you're in the water with one of these massive animals, a whale shark.
Well, it's really, really difficult to describe the flooding, overwhelming emotion that happens to you, it's completely overpowering. It takes you into a higher place that I don't know that I have words available to accurately describe. The way it touches your heart, reaches in and grabs your soul. It opens you up to how beautiful the world can be.
Anyone who's had that experience will know that it's just this pivotal moment in life. And I realized what it was. So it wasn't that I was worried or concerned. It was just the amazement of seeing this animal appearing out of nothing, because they're huge and yet they can disappear in an instant. And they came out of the blue, and you can see the polka spots on it, and swam gracefully, just literally 3 feet below us. And it was the most extraordinary experience that I've ever had.
And because they aggregate to feed, you can see a lot of diversity around them. So that day were a bunch of mobulus rays, a giant manta rays.
After having gone and experienced it myself, I think I understood. That's awesome. How can travelers, if they are traveling to the Quintana Roo area, how can they make sure that they're contributing positively to a sustainable whale shark tourism infrastructure?
Well, that's a good question. So at least one of the important things that they can do is to understand the rules, to try to follow the rules, and of course to contract a boat who has a license. And the boat who has a license, also the captain and the guide has been trained. And the idea on this is that they know the rules and they will follow. And the rules are to protect the whale sharks.
No matter what boat you're on, if they're not doing everything in favor of nature, speak up. And that is the balance. Make a complaint if you see somebody throw a soda can in the water, throw a plastic bag in the water, and just abuse our only home. That's how you strike a balance. Ask the question that needs to be asked. So what is your company doing to help protect the environment? Make them think that, wow, you're making all this money, but you're not giving back. That's not the company I want to be with.
To me also, it's important to go with the local tours. There are a lot of big companies that always, when I'm traveling, I try to avoid, because they represent the massive tourism. And it's better if you go with the local and you are helping a local family.
What would be your advice to younger people, or really anyone for that matter, who is interested in contributing positively to the living world?
What single thing can anyone do that will help remove the key factor in 10 of the world's worst problems? The answer: go vegan, or at least eat less animals. Right now, over 50% of the usable land mass on planet Earth is being used to raise beef, pigs, and chickens. So the agricultural animals is the leading cause of these problems. Anybody that loves animals, if they truly love animals, you can't eat them. I mean, that's like killing for conservation. Really? Oh, you're going to give money so that goes to conservation so you can wipe out a species that's already endangered? That just doesn't make sense. So it's high time that we stood up against trophy hunting, against overfishing, that we made choices so that we walk the talk.
Frustration is something which is always there, and that is simple frustration at the lack of understanding. When you look at somebody and it's pouring down rain, and you say, well, the rain is falling from the sky, but they cannot comprehend that they're getting wet because the rain is falling from the sky. Something so simple so obvious right in front of us, and yet we're not willing as a species, as a society, to take it on board and accept it. So enormous amount of frustration. Anger at times that something so beautiful, so perfect as nature and the planet Earth is being destroyed by us, by humans that are not owners. We don't own this planet. We're simple custodians. We don't have the right to do what we're doing. So I feel a great deal of anger about that. But that anger fuels the will to do something about it, to fight and never stop fighting. So do I have hope for the future? Yes. If I didn't, I would give up.
Our house is on fire. Our animals are headed for extinction. If we don't make huge change now, what we do in the next 10 years will predicate what our planet looks like for thousands of years. So the time to act is now.